Hey, so I want to see if I can explain what my mind has decided is the way in which a aspect of divine light, how God or the 0 point turns into a shadow, or anything you could label. You could put any label in there. You can say shadow, you can say fear, you can say judgment, you can say shame, you can say gluttony, etc., etc. All just their energies, stuck energies. And because we are powerful creators, we can take those stuck energies and stick them to anything or anyone. And we can even create things in the ethers that have bodies and faces, especially when we start depicting what those look like in movies. And you see a movie and you see a really angry character that they've depicted as some sort of monster or something. Well, now that image is attached to your fear, or it has fear attached to it, and it's a real creation. Yeah, endless universes. But I'm going to try and just give a couple of small examples, to kind of put it in the allegorical perspective, which is like my favorite. So let's start with something simple, but not really simple, I guess. Let's talk about possessions, okay? Let's say that everyone was at a state of peace, 0 point, everything was love, everything was light, everything carried cohesive, shareable data, shareable information, nothing that would hinder the bliss state that everybody was in. Now, mind you, this is not the only planet that exists, so there is energies everywhere. So the ways in which these energies might be able to float in are endless. But if you're at the 0 point and you're aware and you know what and who and that you are, when those things enter your field, you're aware of them and you know the loving thing to do with them. But let's just say you're at the 0 point and you're two people in a new existence where everything, or not new existence, but you're at a bliss state, Garden of Eden, if you will. And everybody's got like food and whatnot. And all of a sudden, somebody allows, just because of a momentary daydream or daymare, or just a thought of fear of maybe not having enough food to provide for the family, or enough of whatever it is that they were needing in their very simple lives. But usually it'd probably just come down to food and shelter, and, it can go from there, but those were the basic needs. And all of a sudden, because you don't feel like you have enough, and maybe there's fear or something attached to it, you produce that energy in your home. And then the people that you usually cohesively share with, or even not, let's just say everybody kept to themselves, which I seriously doubt that was the way, but let's just say that you had food, and then the neighbors, for one reason or another, maybe because they allowed it a little distortion in their field, they were in a state of lack, so they needed help from said neighbor, and there was like a fear of shortage, and somehow maybe one of the neighbors took from another neighbor, or asked too many times, or maybe just one simple asking, but the person that was being asked was in such a lack state themselves that all of a sudden the person asking and or taking without asking really instilled that level of fear. And now one of the people started thinking of the other person as a thief, as somebody who was dishonest, saw them in any aspect other than the light, which then added density to their energy field, added a distortion, if you will. Now it's a It's a thought in their mind that has plenty of room to grow because the shields were let down, so to speak, or the discernment was weakened due to the state of fear that was allowed to, the seed of fear that was allowed to, marinate and somehow landed in some fertile ground that ended up growing into something else. And now you take it to that person that, let's say, took something and now is labeled as a thief and carries that energy. And now they're making choices from that place that also they're now something to be feared, because now that has been stuck to their auric field, and for some reason they feel like things around them should be afraid of them and like there's something wrong with them for some reason. And the neighbor doesn't even have to tell them straight out. He just needs to think the thought. But that's not usually how that goes. Usually then there's a talking, and where two or more gather is always in effect. So if two people are sitting there and talking about said shadow and re-enhancing it with some other words and some other feelings, and then all of a sudden these other emotions are like coming up, well, both of those people are now walking around as a distorted field. And anything that they interact with, if they haven't brought that back to the 0 point and to a state of love and remembrance of what they are, and how something that did not fit what they feel to be the truth of what they were was able to sneak in and kind of take over. So there's one little aspect. Let's take it to a deeper level and let's see if I can keep track of it. Let's go into like the whole relationship aspect of things and relations or love. Because keeping in mind that now the field is distorted, okay? And we're not starting from the 0 point. At one point you could have started from the 0 point, and if you were to find a soul that you were magnetized to, you would know and trust and accept and surrender all that you were to that divinity, to that piece of light, to that piece of emulated God that behaved as such and was trusted to feed and nourish with their words and deeds and food, if necessary, like if that fits there. There was no riff, but now let's imagine the field that was distorted, and there is still the yearning for sharing one's heart and unifying as one in some aspect. Even if it's with numerous aspects, it's still one is the goal. And someone that has their distortions falls in love with somebody else that has their distortions, and both people might even be in their process of trying to heal, and like everybody's on their way to remembering or unlearning the things that we've learned. And you end up going into these situations with two distorted fields and trying to fill some emptiness that doesn't exist and only began because of the distortions of fear and shame and gluttony and lust and covetousness, and like all of those things are in the mix from the beginning. And if people don't know that's what's going on, they think that those are their beings, that's who they think that they are, and they'll spend so much time having just like shadow fights. It's just like not even them at their essence, at who they are. Now it's just like distorted field fighting against distorted field, and it's almost impossible to get those two fields to coexist because they're defending something that doesn't even exist. So in the grand scheme of things, if people in general, no matter which situation applies, just work on removing all of the distortions and getting back to the 0 point and realizing what, who, and that we are, then the things that we're actually going to pull forward, because that's another thing, because we're in that distorted field. The only thing we can magnetize from our wounded heart is a replica, a reflection of some way or another of those distortions. So they have no choice but to be a pawn in our little game, in our illusion, and fit the role perfectly until we start seeing the distortions and bringing them back to love. And as you remove the distortions, you start seeing the real being that's there and the real essence that's exposed and the I am that I am and that they are and that everything is. And before you know it, you know, you're in a really good space. And whether you're there unified as one, just sitting pretty by yourself, or you're unified as one with those that come into your existence while they're in your existence and in your present moment, then yeah, then shadows aren't shadows. And it's not like you're trying to disappear, you know, make them disappear or shame them or get rid of them. You're literally unifying them back into light where they originated from. They were all Christ to begin with, if you want to think of it as a person. If that makes it easier to wrap your mind around instead of trying to think big God thoughts of a person, they had Christ inside of them. Everything has Christ. Christ is consciousness, the original consciousness, the original state of consciousness that Jesus came to show us and emulate, and so did many other teachers, so that we could understand that. Not all of the teachers died in a fashion and explained it in a way to those of us that were close to him, that he was doing that so that he could then live within us, which is what communion's all about. It's not figuratively, hey, eat this and know that you're eating me, and drink this and know you're drinking my blood. He was really trying to get through the message that I am you and you are me. And when I leave after this awesome supper, I expect you to uphold the arrangements that we've made and teach everybody what I've shown you to be true, which has nothing to do with the way the religious teachings dictate it. Again, the message is in there, but you have to be able to actually see it. And then you start getting to a point where the distortions even fit the clarity. And you know that one had to exist to make the other, and vice versa. And so it's all divine and it's all truth in some aspect or another. Because again, the distortions that are in there, we created. We created the separation. And if it wasn't us, then who was it? Because we're all that exists. So, I mean, it's up to us to take 100% responsibility of everything we see and feel and create and alchemize that shit. Bring it back to the 0 point. Bring it back to a place that feels good is really all that means. And it's not as hard as you think it is when you're really in your heart. If you're not in your heart, then do all those things that are out there that help you learn how to open up your heart. You can even just listen to some sad music if you need to. I know a lot of people don't like doing that because they don't want to cry. Well, once the tears start, all the emotions you're hiding, well, not all of them at once, thank goodness, but whatever's right there at the surface is going to be prominently being released and processed. And you just have to go with that flow, but you have to get over the fear, that distortion, and the shame, and the whole phrases that are like, oh, big boys don't cry, and, you know, like a strong woman doesn't cry, and you keep your shit pulled together. You know, you got to get all those, like, weird things taken out of your program so that you can undergo this process. And as you start, it just becomes easier and easier. And when you see what happens after, that's all you want to do. You just want to keep clearing stuff out. And in fact, you're inviting in anything you can find that appears in your presence that, you know, or pops into your conscious awareness that you want to bring clarity to. That if there's any distortions, you'll know right away as soon as you try and step in that direction. And sometimes you'll be able to face them and sometimes you won't. But it's all happening all the time. It's all just happening. I love you guys. Have a good day.